The Shadow Guests by Joan Aiken. 9. Eunice, Richard, Moley, Meredith. "What's the Hellfire Club?" Cosmo muttered when he next opened his eyes. He was lying on a bed, and Eunice was standing beside him. Her hair was tousled, and she wore a wind cheater over her pajamas. Lob was panting heavily somewhere nearby. "The Hellfire Club? Why in the world do you want to know that?" She thought for a minute and said, "It was in the 18th century. A group of people, young rakes mostly, I think, who practiced devil worship and black magic, things like that. They wanted to live forever. Where did you hear about them?" But Cosmo had drifted away again. His bones and muscles, every part of him, ached unbearably, as if he had been put through a mincer and turned into shepherd's pie. It was really too painful to put up with. His head felt like a huge globe full of red-hot coals. His tongue was the size of a doormat. "Can I have something to drink?" He tried to gasp, but nobody seemed to hear him. Without any particular effort, he left his body and rose up above it. A very good trick. Why don't they teach that in school instead of silly dodgeball or lists of prime ministers? You just let go, you just slip away. Now he was in a green, mountainous land with yellow lupins flowering and gray birds wheeling overhead and broad, clear, shallow rivers where one could swim or wade forever, picking up pebbles, each one more shining than the last. Con was there, without his neck ring, and Sim, no longer pale and worried. They ran races and sang songs together. Even Lob was there, young and agile, bounding in and out of the water like a puppy after thrown sticks. And over the glossy grass thundered Prince and Blossom, Duke, Duchess, and Queenie, kicking up their enormous heels. Larks were exclaiming endlessly overhead. Otters played Follow My Leader down the riverbank. And on a green slope, in the near distance, Mark and his mother sat reading. Soon they would be up and wave to him joyfully to come to greet him. "Now just put this under your tongue a moment," someone was saying. "Oh, go away," Cosmo protested. "Can't you see I don't want to be disturbed just now? I don't want to leave this place. I want to stay with Mark and Ma." "You have to go this time," Con told him, and Sim said, "Never mind, we'll wait for you here." With grief and extreme reluctance, Cosmo slid back into his body. It seemed to have shrunk since he had left it. "I need a larger size," he thought. "Must tell Eunice, must go to Marks and Spencer." The body felt cold and clammy, too, like a banana peel. Ugh, horrible. They'd much better throw it away. He began to shiver, but somebody packed warm bedclothes round him. He was vaguely aware, in drifts of time, that things were done to him. He was washed, he was obliged to drink, he was given pills and made to swallow them. "I'd much rather go back where I was," he objected muzzily. "Well, I'm afraid we don't agree," said his father's voice. "We want you here." He opened his eyes. "Ted, when did you get here?" "Oh, I've been around," said Richard. He looked extremely tired and thin, grayer than Cosmo remembered. Even his eyebrows were gray. He was not smiling exactly, but there was a light behind his eyes that had not been there for some time. He took hold of Cosmo's hand, shaking a little. "Welcome home," he said. "You gave us a bit of a fright." Eunice came in with a beaker full of hot milk. She, too, was pale but calm. "Here, get this down you," she said scoldingly to Cosmo, and as he drank the disgusting stuff, "Well, you're a fine one. Just you wait till Emma starts laying into you." He looked around. Now he realized he was back in his own room. When had they found time to dismantle the bed and put it up again? He saw, too, that some planks from the sawed-up wardrobe had made into a kind of shelf and cupboard unit at the end of the room. "Good heavens, when was all that done?" "Oh, there was time. We had you down in the garden room at first." "At first?" "You had a touch of pneumonia," his father explained. "Quite a nuisance. You've been one way and another." "Pneumonia? What happened?" "You fell in the water. You fell in the weir. Don't you remember?" Just the kind of thing you were not supposed to do, if you recall," Eunice said tartly, taking the beaker from him. "But no doubt you had good reasons." Now it began slowly to come back to him. "I was in the mill, fighting Osmond. What happened? Did the floor give way?" "I don't know, I'm sure," exploded Mrs. Tidings, who came in at that moment with an extra pillow. Her eyes snapped at Cosmo like sparks from green wood. She looked as if for 2 pins she'd have given him a good spanking. "You were the one who was supposed to be taking care, getting up and skedaddling out in the middle of the night. Just you wait, my lad, just you wait till you're out of that bed. I'll give you medicine." "I had to go. He was calling me. What happened to the others?" The very thought of that awful, hopeless fight began to make Cosmo feel weak and feverish. He lay back on his pillows. "He's had enough talk for now," Eunice said. "You stay with him, Richard. Come on, Emma. You and I had better take ourselves off." Cosmo was content to lie in silence with the comfort of his father's presence beside him. After a longish interval, he asked, "Dad?" "Yes, Cosmo?" "Are you in England to stay now?" "Yes, I am." "That's good." He was silent again for a while, then he said, "Dad, were they ever found?" "Yes, they were found," Richard answered after a moment's pause. "They were together quite peacefully, as they must have died, on a little slope of a hill, so we buried them there and put up a stone with their names." "It's an awfully long way from here," Cosmo muttered. He felt unspeakably sad. Not really. "They did it to break the pattern," Cosmo said, half to himself. "It was a bit away than the other horrible pair." He thought of the hate-filled Osmond and his dreadful mother, ruthlessly intent to save her own son, save the cost of someone else's life. Ruthlessly intent to save her own son, even at the cost of someone else's life. "Dad? What's a striga?" "I think it's some kind of witch," Richard answered. "A woman who could change herself into an owl and fly through closed doors." "I wonder why she couldn't just kill me by her witchcraft. Maybe she tried and realized she couldn't, because he was bound to fight me." "Are you getting delirious again?" No. Where will you be living, Dad?" "I'll do the same as you. Live in college during the week and come out here at weekends." "Terrific!" Holding his father's hand, Cosmo drifted off into thought or sleep, then suddenly coming to again, he asked, "When I fell in the weir, how did they know? It was the middle of the night. "Because of Lob. He roused Eunice. He was in a fearful state, barking and carrying on. Quite frantic, wanted her to go outside, more or less dragged her down there, she said, and there you were, bobbing around. Lob plunged in and hauled you to the edge, and between them, he and Eunice managed to get you out. You owe Eunice quite a lot, one way and another. So do I." "Good heavens," said Cosmo faintly after a moment or two. "Where is Lob? I'd like to see the old fellow." Richard said, "Well, I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, Lob was a very old dog. He was 20, and pulling you out of the water was more effort than he'd made in a long time. It was more than he really had the strength for." "He's dead?" "I'm afraid so, yes." "Oh, poor Eunice," said Cosmo. A long tremor went through him. He closed his eyes tightly as he turned his head sideways on the pillow. "I've brought her nothing but trouble," he whispered, when the Aiken's throat allowed him to speak. "Oh, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say so." Richard stood up. "I have to go to Oxford now to make various arrangements about my work. I'll see you later. Anything you want?" "No, thanks, Father. I'm awfully glad you're here." An hour or so later, Eunice came in with a tray of soap and fruit. "You can probably start getting up tomorrow, the doctor says. Just coming downstairs for a bit at a time." "Eunice," he said, "I'm sorry about Lob." He couldn't help it. The room dissolved around him in a wavering blur. Eunice sat down on his bed, and they wrapped their arms around each other. "Look, Cosmo," she said after a while, "he was an old dog, and rescuing people was what he was meant for. So what a terrible way to go, don't you think? Much better than getting some horrid illness. What a terrific way to go, don't you think? Much better than getting some horrid illness. We won't forget him in a hurry, but presently we might think of getting a puppy who'd be more company for you. Now try and eat your soup." "Will you stay a bit? I'd like to talk to you." "Yes, I was meaning to." So between mouthfuls of soup, Cosmo began to tell her all about Con, and about Sim, and about Osmond and his wicked mother. She listened with the keenest interest. "Do you think they were here all the time, Eunice?" "Possibly so, and your coming here in a rather tensed-up state kind of fetched them out of limbo. I'd like to have seen Sim," she said. "He sounds nice. I think you ought to write all this down, Cosmo, while it's fresh in your memory, about Osmond and his mother. I suppose she couldn't help, poor woman, trying to help her son in the only way she knew, by studying black magic. Osmond was wrong about one thing, though. He wasn't his mother's only son." "How do you know that?" Cosmo asked, amazed. "Richard and I have been looking at family records. Wait, and I'll show you." She went away and came back with a large creased roll of paper which, spread out, proved to be covered by a network of lines and names, like a spider web sagging from the top of a page. A family tree. "Richard had this among his stuff. It goes back to the 1300. He copied it out from the Dorchester records last time he was in England. Look here." Rosamond Curtis and her son Osmond both died in the same year, 1768, but there was a younger son, Francis, born in 1762 and apparently not reared at home. There's a note about him here, sent away as a babe to be brought up by Thos Hendried, yeoman, returned 1780 to claim his inheritance. I wonder why he was sent away. Perhaps his mother took a dislike to him. Or his elder brother couldn't stand him. I wouldn't like to have been Osmond's younger brother. It's curious about that pair, though, Eunice said. 20 years ago, one very dry summer, when your father and I were young, the river was extra low, and they found 2 skeletons downstream from the weir, embedded in the clay bank, a man and a woman. They had forensics experts out from Oxford who said the bones were at least 200 years old, and the woman was much older than the man. So that was what happened to them. I suppose you could say that he died fighting, Cosmo shivered. He was certainly no loss. Something cold shifted against his chest. He drew himself under the bedclothes. He put up a hand to feel it and found his George III penny slung on the piece of binder twine. We didn't like to take it off you, Eunice said, because you kept clutching it and saying that it was your luck. It certainly was. I'm sorry about the mill floor, he said, remembering the moment when he had seen the tip of Osmond's sword driving straight at his chest. Oh, it was in a shocking state, ready to go. We're thinking of applying for a grant to restore it and turn it into a workplace for Richard. He'll need a studio, a lab out here. It's scheduled as a building of historic interest, so you never know. We might be lucky. Finished? Okay. Now have a good rest. There'll be lots to do when you start getting up. She took the tray away. Later that day, Cosmo was allowed downstairs for a couple of hours to sit in the sunny garden room. He was glad when his father came back from Oxford. The big hearth, when he passed by, had seemed strangely bare and forlorn without the tasseled black and white heap of lob stretched out on the warm stone. Do you feel like seeing your friend Paul tomorrow? Richard said. I was talking to his father this afternoon. Norman said he could bring him out if you like. It's Saturday, so there's no school. School? What's the date today? May the 5th. You've missed a week of school already, Richard said. You better hurry up and get back on your legs. You won't want to miss too much tennis. Gosh, no. Cosmo loved tennis. I'd like to see Moley if he wants... Yes, I'd like to see Moley if he wants to come. He'll be disappointed if the furniture doesn't slide about, though. He'll just have to put up with disappointment, then, Mrs. Tidings said, coming in with a pot of tea. The furniture's all settled down again, I'm glad to say. We don't want no more of that nonsense. On the following day, Professor Molesworth brought along Meredith as well as Moley. Cosmo was still not allowed out of doors. It was a cold, gusty May day, so he stayed in the garden room while Moley showed Meredith round the farm and the island and the mill. They were reluctant to leave at first, but Cosmo said, "Oh, go on. It's a shame not to show her while she's here." When Meredith came back, her eyes were shining. Your lookout tree. Wow, what a place. Richard had carefully vetted all the guardrails the day before and replaced the rotten one. He had also, it seemed, told Professor Molesworth a certain amount about the family curse, and Professor Molesworth had told his son. You really are a lucky so-and-so, old comic, said Moley enviously. A family curse. That's a dickens of a lot better than having a stepmama and two dear little step-siblings. I'd swap any day. I don't know, Moley, Meredith said. She looked thoughtful. After all, you'll get away from your step-siblings in the end, but Cosmo will have the curse hanging over him to the end of his life. You'll never know, will you, Cosmo, whether it would be safe to marry and have children or not? No, I suppose I never shall, not for certain. Well, you'll just have to think of other things to do, Moley said robustly. Children, who wants them? Horrible little pests, I say. Cosmo, do show Meredith Flatland. I've been telling her about it. Meredith was fascinated by Flatland and started reading it aloud. Down, 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 then a darkness, then a final all-consuming thunder peal. This sounds just like you, Cosmo, falling through the floor of the mill, and when I came to myself, I was once more a common creeping square in my study at home, listening to the peace cry of my approaching wife. Oh, this is marvelous stuff. A common creeping square. Isn't that a perfect description of Mr. Gabbitas? Mrs. Tidings brought them in their tea. Now you look a bit more like a human being, I must say, she remarked, fixing Cosmo with a sharp eye. But don't you get overexcited now with them squares and triangles. Flapjacks, said Moley ecstatically. Oh, Mrs. Tidings, you do know the way to a person's heart. We were wondering, said Meredith after tea, what you'd think about sharing a study with us next term, Cosmo. Sharing a study? Good heavens! But won't you want to be sharing with Charlie? Cosmo asked Moley. He's leaving at the end of term. His father's taking a job at the University of California, and he's moving the family to Santa Barbara, so we thought perhaps you and us and She'll. She'll's awfully nice when you get to know her, Meredith said seriously. Well, yes, I'd like that very much, Cosmo thought and asked. Who's going to share with poor old Bun? Poor old Bun, he's not getting moved up. And it isn't because he doesn't take snuff, said Moley with an irrepressible chuckle. Old Gab just told him he might be happier in the form below. I expect they'll be quite decent to him, Cosmo said, thinking of Tim and Francis. And for himself, he had a sudden flash of standing in Miss Gracie's line, buying 4 whipped cream walnuts. For you and your 3 friends, Cosmo. That's right, Miss Gracie. How were your holidays, Meredith? He asked. Well, they were pretty horrible, except for the last week. One thing, it's not so bad coming back to school. There's Father, said Moley. Professor Molesworth was strolling over the lawn with Eunice and Richard. I guess it's time to go. Thank you for a super tea, Mrs. Tidings. You haven't eaten the half of it, she scolded. Wait till I put it in a bag for the pair of you to take back to school. See you soon, Cosmo. Hurry up and get well. They said goodbye. He waved to them through the glass panels of the garden room, and then the car drove off. Eunice and Richard turned and strolled over the meadow to the bridge, where they stood leaning on the rail, shoulder against shoulder, looking down at the water. Where I stood when I first saw Sim in the boat, Cosmo thought. And he remembered the other leave-taking as Sim clanked off to join his uncle, valiantly singing, Gallant are they who now have gone with helmet and sword to Ascalon. If he be not in battle slain, he will be a hero when he comes again. And that is the end of the book.